The conference committee will come to order. Today, we meet to consider the staff recommendations to resolve the differences between the two houses on S1177. We will first consider any amendments to the staff recommendations and wrap up with consideration of the staff recommendations themselves. The recommendations have previously been distributed along with the side-by-sides and also are available today from staff. Additionally, before you are our agenda for the day and copies of amendments to be considered. We have several amendments to consider. As has been agreed, we will debate each amendment for 20 minutes, equally divided between the House and the Senate. In a conference, the body of the member offering the amendment first considers the amendment. Under today's agreement, that body will consider the amendment for 10 minutes, equally divided between the majority and the minority, and then vote. If the amendment is adopted, that body will offer the amendment to the other body. Then the other body will discuss the amendment for 10 minutes, equally divided, and vote. We'll repeat this process with each amendment. Let me make what I think is an important administrative announcement. The House is expected to start voting about 10:30. We will try to continue to operate through that period of time, and as long as we don't get pressed into a 2-minute vote, we should be able to continue to do that, particularly if the Senate is debating during that process. If we can't make it, then I would expect we would recess very briefly, maybe 15 minutes or so, while we're able to get the logistics of that voting on the floor of the House. I think we're starting with four vote series? Yes, four vote series, and then we'll vote, then we'll have another series noonish or 1 o'clock or so. All right. We're shaking off the rust here, getting ready to go. I see Mr. Thompson would like to be recognized to offer an amendment. Mr. Thompson's amendment is in your folders. I'm going to recognize Mr. Thompson to explain his amendment and ask him to limit his explanation to just a couple of minutes because there's only 5 minutes aside. Thompson, you're recognized.
Good. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce an amendment for consideration here in conference. As many of you know, ensuring the fairness of Title I allocation formulas has been a priority of mine since the 112th Congress. Currently, Title I funds are allocated using 4 formulas and 2 separate weighting systems, percentage weighting and number weighting. And to date, there had been minimal efforts to determine if the 4 formulas and their weighting systems are adequately delivering funds to local education agencies with the highest district-wide poverty averages. The amendment I'm proposing today commissions the Director of the Institute of Education Sciences to complete a study on the effectiveness of the 4 existing Title I formulas within 18 months of enactment of this act. The findings of the study will then be shared with members of the Senate Help Committee, the House Committee on Education Workforce, and the public in a timely fashion. This amendment will provide up-to-date and streamlined findings on the effectiveness of the 4 existing Title I formulas. It is my hope that, aided by this information, we can engage in meaningful discussion on the Title I program with our fellow committee members, our other distinguished colleagues, and stakeholders across the country. It is our duty to ensure that we are serving the neediest populations of children to the best of our ability, and I believe this amendment is a step towards achieving that goal. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his clear, concise, and brief explanation of his amendment. Are there members from the minority looking for time to discuss the amendment? Minority in the House.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for working with members of the conference to write this amendment in a way that ensures that the Institute of Education Science looks at all available data and all targeting of federal resources and making recommendations on equitable allocation of Title I. As I've said time and time again, the purpose of Title I is to target federal funding to communities plagued with concentrations of poverty. And while it may be true that large urban districts have lower district-wide average poverty ratings due to their geographical bodies, it's also true that nearly half of all enrolled students in these districts attend very high poverty schools. So it's critical when we discuss a formula, we look not only at comparison of districts, but also the impact on eligible school attendance areas serving our most at-risk students. This amendment takes those considerations into account. and for that reason, I support the amendment.
Gentleman offers his support and yields back. Are there other members of the House, other House conferees seeking recognition on this amendment? If none, the question occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the gentleman's amendment is agreed to. The Thompson Amendment has been adopted by the House conferees, and it is offered to the Senate. Senator Alexander, would you please lead the 10-minute discussion and vote among your Senate conferees?
I'll bet we can beat 10 minutes. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin discussion of the amendment. My opinion is, I think Mr. Thompson has a good amendment here. This is an explosive subject, and maybe the explosion will be smaller if we get better data, because I would like to see federal dollars follow a poor child to the school that child attends. Others feel that by doing that, it hurts some schools. To have better data will help us come to some conclusion about this. So I think it's a very helpful amendment. I have no objection to it. I would ask any of my Republican colleagues if they have an objection to it, and then I'll turn to Senator Murray for her comments.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank you for offering this amendment. I think it is a good one. I think there's been a lot of discussion about Title I formula funding. Getting the facts is important. I know that Representative Thompson's been working on this for a long time, and I think putting forth a reasonable amendment on this issue, directing IAS to look at Title I formula and report back to Congress on the impact of the current formula in our country will help all of us. So I support it as well, encourage my colleagues to.
Are there other comments from senators? I'd like to, I assume that what this study will look at is how Title I money is distributed state by state, and then also how it's distributed within states, right?
I believe that's what the gentleman indicates. That's correct.
Okay. All those in favor on the Senate side say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The measure is approved. The amendment's agreed to.
Okay. Looks like the Senate has accepted the House offer, and the amendment is adopted. Are there other members seeking to offer an amendment? I understand that Senator Enzi has an amendment. It is in your folders. As previously agreed, we will consider this amendment for 20 minutes, equally divided, and I will yield to Senator Alexander to lead the debate and discussion on the Senate side first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now turn to Senator Enzi's amendment number 1. Senator Enzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman. I agree that it is important that we wisely invest in early childhood education, and we have shown that throughout history. When I came to the United States Senate, we had 119 preschool programs. Senator Kennedy and I got that down to 65 programs, and since it's gotten down to about 40 programs. These programs are overseen by the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, the Department of Justice, the Department of Labor, and Housing and Urban Development. There have been some work done to show that there is some tremendous overlap, and I know that we can do better yet. And so what this amendment would do is require a review and a report to Congress of that program and other early childhood investments that the federal government makes. The review would be reported 2 years from the enactment of this law and will recommend how we can eliminate overlap and fragmentation among all federal early learning programs. Then every year thereafter, Congress will receive an update on that report. And my goal is that this will serve as an annual indicator to Congress as well as agencies that administer these programs of significant overlap of federal early childhood investments and inform the process so that we can more wisely use our money and streamline the programs for efficiency. Given that this amendment simply asks for a study that builds off both the Government Accountability Office report and the study required by the Child Care and Development Block Grant, I'd ask for a voice vote.
Is there debate on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murray.
I want to thank Senator Enzi for working with me and my staff on this amendment. The Senator knows I'm a very strong proponent of increasing investments in early childhood education programs, and I'm really pleased that we were able to work together to ensure that we're addressing his priority as well. And I'm really pleased that the framework that we have includes a program to improve quality and access for early childhood education and ensure states are using their existing resources to better coordinate and streamline their systems. The study amendment that the senator's offering will ensure that we in the Congress have important information about our success in this area and where we still have more work to do. And I think it's a really good idea. I support the amendment and thank the senator for offering.
Further debate on the NZ amendment on the Senate side? Mr. Chairman, the NZ amendment is complementary to the provision in the framework, which provides funding for states to better coordinate and align the existing federal dollars that are being spent for early childhood education. We heard repeatedly in testimony before our committee that one of the major obstacles to better serving children in the early ages were the complication of the competing federal programs. So I fully support the NZ amendment. Is there any objection to a voice vote on the NZ amendment on the Senate side? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The measure is approved. The amendment's agreed to.
The House will now take up the NZ amendment.
Noticed how succinct the Senate is being this morning, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I am pleased and astonished at the alacrity with which the Senate has taken this up. This study that the Senator Enzi has put forward will provide useful information on how to make our early education investment more efficient and effective. It's a good amendment. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and would yield to Mr. Scott or someone on the minority side for any comments they might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, each program serves a distinct purpose to meet the needs of specific populations and communities. There may be some overlap in studying the matter cannot possibly do any harm. So I would agree with the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there other members who would like to speak? Mr. Grothman.
Yeah, I just want to point out in the middle of this love fest, and I'll support the amendment, but I think it is not unanimous at all. The early childhood programs are that much of a panacea for everything, and I think I urge people to broaden their reading if they think this is a wonderful investment. I think there are a lot of studies out there that show that these are not that great of an investment, and we ought to focus on strengthening families rather than more government early childhood.
The gentleman yields back. Are there other House conferees who would like to comment on the Enzi amendment which has been passed to the House side? Any other comment? If not, the question occurs on the Enzi amendment. For House conferees, all those in favor of the Enzi amendment say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The amendment passes. The amendment has now passed both House and Senate, so the amendment is adopted. We're back to the House side for an amendment, and I believe that Ms. Bonamici has an amendment. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to offer this amendment. My amendment expands the list of allowable activities in the Title IV formula grants meant to support well-rounded educational opportunities. The amendment adds to the list of activities that improve instruction and student engagement in STEM subjects the option of developing programs that integrate other subjects such as arts in the study of STEM. The amendment also allows school districts to use funding to support other interdisciplinary programs that combine fields of study to create rich learning opportunities for students. Many schools have found that integrating arts, for example, into the study of math or engineering makes these subjects more engaging and accessible to students who do not have confidence in the STEM fields. And furthermore, evidence shows that combining disciplines can promote innovative thinking. I speak with businesses on a regular basis. They say that their workforce needs not only technical skills, they're also looking for people with new ideas and new ways to solve problems. The real world needs people who have technical know-how and are also creative and innovative, and our education system ought to foster both sets of skills. My amendment does not limit how school districts may support well-rounded education, and it does not create new requirements for school districts. The amendment does, however, make clear that school districts can build up programs that integrate subjects, such as music and math. These programs educate both halves of students' brains and set students up for success in a world that values well-rounded workforce and innovation. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I think this is, it is important that we increase participation in STEM programs. I think this is a good amendment. I support the amendment and urge my colleagues to support the amendment. Are there other House conferees who have comments on the Bonamici amendment? If not, the question occurs on the Bonamici amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We will now take, this amendment will now transfers to the Senate, and I yield to Senator Alexander to lead the discussion on the Senate side on the Bonamici amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the Bonamici amendment's a helpful amendment. I remember when President Bush I and the governors of the country set national education goals of math, science, English, history, geography, and no mention of arts and music. And there was a great outcry because the music teachers and the arts teachers said, well, you don't think what we're doing is important, and it is important. And we know it's important. And I think since this amendment specifically does not mandate anything to state and local school districts, it's an expression, I would say, of Congress of the importance of relating arts to the STEM academic program where states, teachers, and local school districts think that's important. So I support it, and I ask if there are other comments on the Senate side. Senator Murray?
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Congressman Bonamici for offering this amendment. I'm a huge supporter of STEM, and I think integrating arts and other disciplinary subjects is important. As the chairman said, this doesn't mandate it, it just allows it. I think that is extremely important. I support the amendment, urge my colleagues to do the same.
Other comments on the Senate side? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The amendment is approved.
Complicated microphone here. The amendment, Bonamici amendment, has been adopted by both House and Senate conferees. The amendment is adopted. We turn now, the next amendment, I believe, is to be offered by Senator Bennett. Senator Alexander, would you please control that time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment today addresses an important topic to all of us, testing, which we all know is not popular. As I mentioned yesterday, I've got 3 daughters in the Denver Public Schools, and at our house every year we see what testing looks like. I believe we're over-testing our kids, but I don't think it's because of the federal requirement. As a father, I want to know each year how my kids are doing against a set of rigorous standards. I want to know how they compare to other kids in Denver, across Colorado, and around the world. The annual assessments in reading and math required under ESCA provide important information to parents, teachers, principals, legislatures, and communities. They allow us to hold schools accountable for making sure children are learning. But there's a lot we can do to streamline these tests, and the problem, in my view, is not the federal requirement. It's the way the federal requirement collides with layers of state assessments and district assessments. We need to think differently about each test. Testing for teaching and learning needs to be continuous, ongoing, and inform a teacher's instruction and the principal's leadership. It's the testing done for accountability purposes that I think needs serious reevaluation. States and districts should limit the overall amount of time students spend taking tests. They should aim for the minimum amount needed to acquire important information about student achievement for accountability purposes. States should establish a target cap on the total amount of time spent taking these assessments. This target would be state-determined and subject to discussion among parents, teachers, and policymakers. And I want to underscore this amendment in its current form does not require states to set a target. It is merely permissive. The target would allow tests to achieve important goals but protect the precious classroom time teachers need to provide a high-quality education to all students. This is a sensible way to respond to concerns that have been voiced by students, parents, teachers, principals, and communities in Colorado and across the country. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I thank the chairman for his willingness to allow me to offer it.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. No issue provoked as much discussion in our hearings as did the subject of testing. And we started out thinking, or at least some did, that the problem was the 17 federal tests that are required. They're state designed, but they're required by the federal government between the 3rd grade and the 12th grade. But the testimony that we heard showed that those tests probably take about 2 hours each between the 3rd grade and the 12th grade, and that wasn't the problem. The problem was that the federal accountability system tied to the tests was causing state and local governments to issue require dozens of tests. In fact, Fort Myers, Florida, had 183 tests between kindergarten through the 12th grade, and only 17 of those were the federally required tests. So my opinion is that our entire work here will solve the problem of over-testing by continuing to require the 17 state-designed tests between the 3rd grade and the 12th grade, but leaving it to states and local governments to decide how to value that test and what other assessments make sense. The best people to decide what are the most appropriate assessments and tests are classroom teachers and local school boards and states. So I think the Bennett Amendment is helpful, just as the Baldwin Amendment was helpful, which is a part of this, in calling attention to the problem of over-testing and reminding states and local school boards that it's not federal tests, at least it won't be after this law passes. It's not federally required tests of the over-testing problem, and they need to take a look at their own tests, just like Fort Myers, Florida did when it suddenly discovered it had 183 tests and it was responsible for all but 17 of those. Anyone else have a comment? Senator Murray?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I really want to thank Senator Bennett for offering this amendment and for his attention to the issue of over-testing. No Child Left Behind got some things right, but it also established this rigid state accountability system that overemphasized test scores and created this one-size-fits-all intervention for low-performing schools. And the pressure on the high-stakes tests led our states and districts to increase the amount of testing, as Senator Alexander just alluded to. I've heard loud and clear from parents and teachers and students in my home state of Washington that students are spending far too much time on testing. The SEA framework makes some important changes to lower the stakes on testing to reduce the pressure so students can spend less time testing and more time learning. Senator Bennett's amendment would actually go one step further by allowing our states to set a cap on the amount of time students are spending on testing. That will really encourage our states and districts to look closely at the assessments that they administer and eliminate those tests that are unnecessary or duplicative, and provide parents with some peace of mind knowing that their children are spending less time testing and more time learning. So I want to thank him for offering this amendment. I encourage our colleagues to support it.
Any further comment from the Senate side? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The measure is approved. The amendment's agreed to.
The Senate has, conferees have passed the Bennett Amendment. The House conferees will now take up the Bennett Amendment. Let me start by saying I identify with Senator Alexander's comments about the high-stakes nature of the testing that's been associated with No Child Left Behind and what many people would say are the draconian consequences associated with that. And that's principally where the problem lies. The Bennett Amendment clarifies that states may, and I think that's certainly very important to me, and I would suspect many of my colleagues, the states may set a targeted limit on that testing time and number. And because of the nature of the wording of that, even though I think it's not a time issue nearly as much as the stakes involved, I support the Bennett Amendment and encourage my colleagues to do so. The other House members wishing to speak on the Bennett, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if we're going to deal with the achievement gaps, you've got to have basic data to ascertain where those gaps occur. And if states want to limit the time for that assessment, that's fine, so long as the critical information is actually gathered. I'm proud that this framework that we're working on includes language from the SMART Act introduced by the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, which will help states and districts take a close look at how many tests they're taking and give them the tools they need to eliminate unnecessary, redundant, and low-quality assessments. Since the amendment still provides that basic information must be obtained, I don't see any problem with eliminating the duplicative, redundant, and low-quality assessments that just waste everybody's time, and so I support the amendment.
The gentleman supports and yields back. I know that Dr. Fox had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention, I was on a school board for 12 years. I heard people, the principals blame the school board for things they did. When I was in the legislature, the superintendents blamed the legislature for what they did. And then the legislature blames the federal government. I think putting the responsibility where it belongs is the main strength of this bill, and getting the federal government out of mandating. And as the chairman said, using the word may, then when people come to us and complain that we're forcing all this testing, we can put the responsibility where it clearly belongs. I think one of the problems in our society is we've created a situation where other people get blamed for actions certain people do. So I really want to support our pushing the responsibilities down and having people take the responsibility that they are being allowed to have. So I want to say I support the concept everywhere we can apply it. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Are there other House conferees seeking recognition on the Bennett Amendment? If not, the question occurs on the Bennett Amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The Senate and House have both concurred in the Bennett Amendment. It is therefore adopted. We go now to, I think Mr. Messer has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to offer the amendment. Evolving technology is changing the way that teachers instruct and students learn in the 21st century. These innovations create tremendous opportunities, but new technologies also generate new threats to student data privacy that never existed before. Parents are legitimately concerned, and states and school districts across the country are taking steps to increase their capacity to utilize and appropriately share student data while protecting the privacy of the students that they serve. For the last year and a half, Congressman Polis and I have been working to assist in those efforts. Our focus has been to strike an appropriate balance, encouraging the use of technology to improve education outcomes in the classroom, while also supporting a parent's right to protect their child. While I know the bill we're discussing today doesn't update FERPA or offer other new solutions to education, technology, privacy challenges, steps can be taken today that make kids safer, and my amendment does that. Under Title IIA of the ESEA, state and local education agencies have access to funds that increase student academic achievement by improving the skills of teachers and principals. My amendment today would simply allow those funds to be used in support of efforts to educate teachers on the appropriate uses of student data. This training could help ensure individual student privacy is protected. As we encourage our educators to also be innovators in the classroom and embrace technological advances, it's important to also provide them with the tools needed to do so safely. I look forward to working with my colleagues as we move forward on additional student data privacy legislation, but I urge the adoption of this amendment today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Are there members seeking recognition? Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the amendment. We are collecting a lot of data on students, and if we're going to be serious about protecting their privacy, obviously teachers have to be given some guidance on how to protect that data and what is appropriate use and what is not. This amendment helps in that effort, and therefore I support it and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Are there other members seeking, Mr. Rokita? We're going to go back and forth here. Mr. Rokita, you recognize.
I thank the chairman. I speak in support of this amendment. I think it's important for teachers to be trained. I also want to point out to members of the the conference that it's only one factor. We have a lot of work to do in this area, quite frankly, along the lines of what Mr. Messer said and what Mr. Scott said. FERPA, or the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, really needs to be updated and updated holistically. The House has a bipartisan product in that regard. Ms. Fudge and I have H.R. 3157, goes through FERPA in its entirety, and I think we really need to get to it. We tried in the negotiation leading to today to put that bill in this product, and it was a bridge too far. And while I can understand that, and while Mr. Messer's amendment, again, deserves to be supported and is a part of getting us there, I urge us all to holistically look at updating FERPA for the 21st century. With that, I urge support of the Messer's amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Polis, I would advise my House conferees that the clock is ticking down and request that you be brief. Mr. Polis, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm pleased to speak in support of Representative Messer's amendment to Title II. And as Mr. Messer mentioned earlier this year, we had the opportunity to introduce the bipartisan Student Digital Privacy and Parental Rights Act, bringing together a diverse group of stakeholders, making sure that we had the ability to couple both the promise of educational technology with the confidence of families and privacy advocates that minors' personal information would be used only in appropriate and not inappropriate ways. While we weren't able to get the new privacy provisions into this bill, I'm excited that this amendment will go further in allowing professional development funds to help make sure that educators have the tools they need and the best practices around student data privacy under current law. What we find is that in the field, even our current privacy requirements are not widely known, nor are teachers necessarily aware of everything that is currently within their ability to protect the privacy of their students. With the evolution of technology, it's more important than ever to protect student privacy. It's an excellent use of our resources to train teachers how to do that. It's an excellent start to use the tools that we already have and better educate educators as to what those are. I'm proud to support Representative Messer's amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also urge support of this. I'm grateful to this committee for its earlier support of many of my privacy amendments that we've been able to get passed. It is essential that not only we protect individual data, but if things are to move forward, they only be aggregated so that individuals are protected, that Native American children are protected. There's a lot of work that we still have to do. But coupled with that, we can pass many of those measures if we don't have the teachers that understand the technology and know how to make sure we protect children and teachers' data, then we're going to continue to have issues moving forward. So I'm grateful that my colleague has done this amendment, and I support it.
Gentleman yields back. Are there other House conferees seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question occurs on Mr. Messer's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. And the Messer amendment is adopted by House conferees and is passed to the Senate, and I yield to Senator Alexander.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I support the Messer amendment. We live in a world in which we're overwhelmed by data, and managing it is one of our greatest challenges in our committee. Dr. Cassidy, and I know Dr. Owen, I've talked about this as well, see doctors' offices overwhelmed by data and in our electronic healthcare record system. So a very good use of Title II funds by states and local school districts has turned out to be managing data. Because of the way their budgets work, most states, most local school districts don't have money for that. Sometimes it's expensive. And so the professional development programs that help teachers learn how to manage data are already allowed. This puts an emphasis on making sure they manage it in a way that protects student privacy. We want students and parents and the public to be able to use data to understand how teachers, students, and schools are doing. We want that to happen, but we also want to do it in an appropriate way that recognizes student privacy. So I respect this amendment and appreciate it, support it. Are there other Senate comments. Senator Murray.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Mr. Messer for offering this really important amendment and concur with everything that's been said. This would just simply allow funding for professional development to be used for high-quality, evidence-based training in how to effectively use the data and improve student learning. So I think it's a really good amendment. It'll help our teachers get the training they need to be responsible with student data, and I support the amendment. You need to take a vote.
Oh, excuse me, I got diverted here. Are there any other senators who wish to speak? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is approved and agreed to.
The House and Senate conferees both having passed the amendment is adopted. Just administrative comment, you heard the buzzer. The House has got a vote on the floor. We're going to try to work through it if we can. So I would encourage House conferees, grab the vote when you can. The sequence is a previous question vote, adoption of the rule, 10 minutes of motion to recommit debate, MTR vote, and passage. We're going to try to work it. If that gets too hard, let me know, and we'll recess. I understand that Ms. Wilson has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment would help schools establish and improve dropout prevention and reentry programs. Mr. Chairman, the bipartisan framework before us will do much to defend the educational gains made in the 50 years of ESEA and help ensure more students have access to the quality education that is their civil right. But what happens to the children who begin to receive that quality education but fail, for whatever reason, to make it to graduation? Each year, about 1 in 5 high school students fail to graduate from high school. That adds up to more than 500,000 students. As we know, the failure to graduate seriously compromises an individual's economic mobility. During their working lives, high school dropouts earn an average $630,000 less than graduates and often have limited opportunities for career advancement. Lower earnings for high school dropouts deprive our economy of $300 billion in working income each year. More importantly, as a society, we lose out on the promise and potential of so many Americans. Most of the children who drop out of school are not incapable. They do not lack the intellect to make it to graduation. As many of us in education know, there are so many obstacles to graduation completion that far too many children carry with them into the classroom. Unfortunately, too many schools lack the capacity or resources to develop programs to prevent these students from falling through the cracks. Students, like the child who finds it almost impossible to sustain interest in school after going through a traumatic life event like the murder of a parent or a sibling. Students like the child who has missed too many days of school because she is left caring for younger siblings or ailing family members. Students like the child who has fallen behind in his schoolwork because he works nights and weekends to help support his struggling family. Students like the child who skips class because he feels deeply unsafe at his own school. These children simply need support and resources to stay invested and engaged in their education. My amendment would create an additional use of SSAE funds so schools can establish and improve the dropout and reentry programs that give potential dropouts the support they need. I want to emphasize that my amendment does not call for additional spending. My amendment does not create a new program. It does not require schools to create a new program, either, because the framework before us gives us LEAs the flexibility to use SSAE funds in a way that best works for the needs of their students. For many schools, there's a need for stronger dropout prevention. My amendment allows school communities to create and improve dropout prevention programs that speak to the distinctive environmental factors that contribute to dropouts in their areas. Because issues that exist in Memphis may not be the issues that exist in Miami. The framework before us already recognizes the role of graduation rates in assessing the successfulness of schools. If states hold schools accountable for graduation rates, schools must be allowed to use funding to support efforts to increase graduation rates. For these reasons, I strongly urge my colleagues to vote in favor of my dropout prevention amendment. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. I think this is an important issue, and it is a good thing to clarify that funds in the flexible grant program can be used to support dropout prevention and reentry programs. I urge my colleagues to support it. Are there other House conferees seeking recognition? If not, the question occurs on the amendment from the gentlelady from Florida. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House has agreed to the amendment, and I yield to Senator Alexander.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin discussion of Representative Wilson's amendment. As she mentioned yesterday, I had the privilege of visiting her school 23 years ago and presenting an award to her for, among other things, outstanding work on dropout reentry, the very subject she's talking about today. I think her remarks were excellent. I support her amendment, and I think it's important to put a focus on improving school dropout reentry, and she's just the one to propose it. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Representative Wilson as well for offering this amendment. While high school graduation rates in our country reached an all-time high this year, 20% of our students still do not graduate on time, if at all. Her amendment will clarify that districts can use funding from our new student support and academic enrichment grants to provide dropout and reentry programs for their students. These types of programs really are critical to making sure all our students can graduate prepared for college and career. I support this amendment and urge our colleagues to do as well.
Is there further Senate discussion on the Wilson amendment? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The measure is approved. The amendment is agreed to, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Alexander. The House and Senate conferees both having adopted the Wilson amendment, it is now adopted for the conference. I know that the senators are not sitting on the edge of their chairs about this vote issue, but on this side we're scooting around a little bit, but I think we're going to be able to do it. We're going to move to the Baldwin amendment, and if at some time I jump up to go vote, the subcommittee chair, Mr. Rokita, will sit here and allow that debate to continue. So this is going to be the Baldwin amendment, and I yield to Senator Alexander to monitor the discussion on the Senate side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we work to finish this important effort on this key legislation dealing with education, I would like to take a moment to talk about my amendment, which would tackle another important education issue that we must also address, and address urgently. The Perkins Loan Program, which has been in existence since 1958 and is a campus-based revolving fund, expired on October 1st of this year. My amendment would provide for a no-cost one-year extension of the Perkins Loan Program. It incorporates the extension measure which passed the House of Representatives earlier this fall by a voice vote under the leadership of Chairman Klein and Ranking Member Scott. I do understand that this amendment would be ruled outside of the scope of this conference and therefore will not press for a vote. But nonetheless, I feel compelled to remind my colleagues of this unfinished business that impacts whether the students that we're concerned with in this reauthorization will also be able to afford to take their next steps in their educational journeys. I share our chairman's desire to move forward on a Higher Education Act reauthorization very soon and engage in the same sort of thoughtful bipartisan process to revise and improve that law as we have seen borne out in this discussion on the ESEA. Unfortunately, by letting the Perkins Loan Program authorization lapse, we have left thousands of current and future students facing uncertainty and hundreds of institutions struggling to find another way to help their neediest students afford an education. I am grateful to Chairman Alexander and Ranking Member Murray for the collaborative way in which they have led the Senate through the ESEA reauthorization, and I am truly excited about the prospect of undertaking Higher Education Act reauthorization in a similar spirit. But I also know that that process, too, will and should take time. I'd note that it was 7 months ago when we marked up the Every Child Achieve Act in committee. In the interim, I believe it's critical that we not leave these students and institutions depending on Perkins in the lurch. And while this conference will not provide us the opportunity to do so today, I urge my colleagues to come together and enact an extension before we adjourn for the year.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. I understand that you will not be asking for a vote. Is that correct? Is there further discussion on Senator
Yes.
Baldwin's amendment? Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to reiterate somewhat what Senator Baldwin said. I appreciate her work on this. For Pennsylvania, this is a 40,000 student issue, 40,000 students in our state. I know that the argument has been made about grandfathering, but here's the problem with that. Current freshman students are not grandfathered, nor are students who change their majors, students who change their course of study, and students who transfer to another school. Just give you two quick examples, then I'll be done. Two individuals, Abigail Anderson, a freshman at Immaculata University in southeastern Pennsylvania. She has a Perkins loan of $2,000. She's had it all figured out, but now that the program will go away, she said, quote, "This changes everything." That's one individual. The second individual, Amber Gunn, a freshman at Temple University in Philadelphia, didn't have enough money to pay her tuition bill. Her mother wasn't able to co-sign loans for her, but she was able to get a Perkins loan for $5,000 to help her education at Temple. Here's what she said, among other things. "Without Perkins, I wouldn't be able to enroll in my first semester of school. I'm not sure what I'll do next year," unquote. That's the problem with this. It's not just the adverse impact, it's the uncertainty that this causes for students. So I'm grateful for Senator Baldwin's leadership. I know we have a disagreement with Chairman Alexander on this, and I know it's being withdrawn, but I think it's important to talk about this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to echo the concerns raised by Senator Baldwin and Senator Casey. The Perkins Loan Program is a revolving loan fund. It is extraordinarily important to thousands of students in the state of Maine. I realize it is not germane to this bill, but I would hope that we could come together for a short-term extension of the program that then would allow us to take that broader overview of federal financial aid as we reauthorize the Higher Education Act.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Franken.
You didn't look that happy to hear from.
Well, I'm always happy to see Senator Franken.
I just wanted to echo.
You just sounded like you were coming from the ceiling or
Yeah,
something.
well, I guess maybe because I'm echoing.
Yeah.
So I'd like to echo.
I knew I shouldn't have said anything.
I'd like to echo Senator Collins' echo in my support. This is 10,000 students in Minnesota who receive these loans. So that's all I'm doing. I'm echoing.
Thank you, Senator Franken. Anyone else on the Senate side? Let me make a couple of remarks. The expiration of the Perkins Loan Program shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. It was set to expire in 2012. The department extended that to 2015. Department of Education notified colleges back in January that it could not be made available to new students. Federal government hasn't contributed any new funding to the Perkins program since 2004, that's 11 years. President Bush proposed to eliminate it. President Obama has proposed a complete overhaul. The interest rate, the Perkins loan is not as generous as direct loans that are available to all students. The interest rate's higher than the interest rate on the direct loan program. And probably more importantly, the very generous income-based repayment program available to all students who get direct loans is not available on Perkins loans. Plus, if we continued the program for the next 5 years, and the next 10 years, it would cost $5 billion. We have proposals before our committee in reauthorizing higher education to simplify the student aid program. That would be one loan for undergraduates. If we had one loan for undergraduates, that would not include an additional loan like the Perkins loan, and we could use the $5 billion instead for year-round Pell Grants, for additional Pell Grants, and for other needs. So I know that we have differences of opinion on the committee. I should point out current students receiving a Pell loan won't be harmed during this school year. Those that received a Perkins loan for the first time this year will have a one-year loan. Those that received a Perkins loan prior to the school year may continue to receive one in their current program. So here's my suggestion, Senator Baldwin, Senator, and other senators, is the sooner we can get a bipartisan process established to deal with the Higher Education Act, which Senator Murray and I will turn to as soon as we finish this work, the sooner we can deal with whether to continue the Perkins loan, modify the Perkins loan, or simplify the loan program and have a single loan. Senator Baldwin's view may very well prevail in our committee because we'll have open amendment process and whatever the bipartisan process is. So I appreciate her bringing it up, and I hear the comments of the other senators, and I look forward to a prompt moving ahead in our committee on reauthorizing the Higher Education Act as soon as we finish fixing No Child Left Behind.
I thank the chair.
Since Senator Baldwin is not asking for a vote on the amendment, that concludes our discussion of it.
I thank the chairman. I thank the senator for withdrawing. It's now in order on the House side to hear from Mrs. Davis on an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just reading from the description so that everybody has that in front of you, this amendment would require the Secretary of Ed to disseminate through a clearinghouse practices used by districts in conducting and creating teacher evaluation systems that were developed and implemented with input from local stakeholders. This is really about great educators and about local control. We know how critical feedback is to every professional, and particularly our teachers and our principals. And so I think if we, even though we weren't able to come to a real agreement around any particular program, all this does is encourages and really mandates that the Department of Ed create this clearinghouse so the information is available. It's available for people who choose to access it. Nobody has to. It's a little like our democratic libraries. Everyone can use them, but not everybody has to use them. And it gives them the opportunity to really see what's working out in communities. And then I think it does what's very important to all of us. It says to local school districts, you take from that what you can and develop the very best program you can with all of your stakeholders together at the table. And I think that's really what we want. It facilitates that sharing of locally created teacher and principal evaluation plans between school districts. So it does those two things we all care about. It has the federal government standing behind strong educator feedback, and at the same time really supports local control for those communities. This is really the only place in the bill that there's any reference whatsoever to strong evaluation systems.
Thank the gentlelady. Is there anyone on the House side that wishes to be heard? Hearing none, I would say that I appreciate the amendment. Teacher evaluations are a state and local issue. If states or school districts want to collaborate, they certainly can and do not need the federal government deciding what works best in terms of those evaluations. And so, as a co-author of the bill, at least, it's my belief that this clearinghouse isn't necessary, and I urge my colleagues a no vote. On the House side, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. 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 Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And it's not passed, right?
Okay, we're doing a little switching here, and we'll continue to do so as the vote on the House floor continues. As I understand it, with the amendment failed on the House side, so it is not conveyed to the Senate. It is now in order to go to Mr. Polis, who has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk. This amendment to Title III of ESEA would provide additional opportunities for dual or concurrent enrollment in early college high school programs for English language learners. What this means is while students are enrolled in high school, they are also able to earn credit or a full associate's degree. These programs exist across Colorado, across many states. By amending an eligible use into Title III, we can enhance the offering of community college courses to English language learners. I've visited a number of schools across my district that work in conjunction with community colleges and other higher education providers. In early college high school I visited last week, nearly every student not only graduates in 4 or 5 years with a high school diploma, but also graduates with an associate's degree with a skill or certificate that will allow them for success in the workforce. Students at early college high schools and comprehensive high schools that have concurrent enrollment programs really get a jump start on their college education, particularly breaking down barriers for at-risk groups like English language learners. With my amendment, English language learners will have more opportunity for these types of programs that will give them a head start on a college degree. I was also looked very carefully and closely at the language around how we calculate completion rates and graduation rates for high schools, and I was pleased to see that it's flexible enough to ensure that 5- and 6-year programs that allow for students to get associate's degrees at the same time they get high school degrees will not receive any unfavorable consideration in the way that we calculate graduation rates. I will not be offering the other amendment that I had. I want to mention that briefly. And the other amendment that I was going to offer would have reinstated House charter school language that would give states that allow charter schools the ability to serve as school food authorities a priority in funding and encouraging it as a best practice policy. Many charter schools want to innovate by doing school breakfast programs or different school lunch programs than the district may do, and we all know how important nutrition is as a part of a good education, particularly for our most at-risk students. I'm convinced, and having consulted with committee staff, that there are ways to work within the existing language with the future secretary and in rulemaking to encourage states to allow charter schools to be independent food authorities and set up their own school lunch programs. I'm particularly excited to highlight the importance of dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment programs, particularly as they apply to English language learners, and to add them as an allowable use under Title III, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We're having a little flurry of activity here. I see on both sides of the room. I think this is a good clarifying amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Are there other members, House conferees, seeking to address the gentleman from Colorado's amendment? Hearing none, the question occurs on the gentleman's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House conferees have passed it, and I yield to Senator Alexander for the Senate consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I compliment Mr. Polis. I think this is a helpful amendment. Some areas of the country may already be doing this, but it focuses attention on the increasing practice of dual enrollment. I know that in many Tennessee community colleges, as many as 25 or 30% of the students who are there have not yet graduated from high school. They're in both high school and the community college. which is a good development. And it's going to present us with the question soon of what to do about Pell Grants for those students, because that will be expensive, and we may or may not be able to afford it. We don't know what the consequences of that would be. But this is a helpful amendment. It allows local school districts to use federal funds for these purposes if it wants to, and it's not a mandate. Sounds like a smart use of funds to me. I support it. Senator Murray?
I'll just make a short statement. I support the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Any other senator have a comment on the Polis amendment? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The measure is approved. The amendment's agreed to.
The Senate has accepted the House offer on the Polis amendment. Therefore, the amendment is adopted. We're going to recess for about a half an hour. We have votes continuing. They just called for the second vote. It'll probably only take 20 minutes or so, but we're going to recess for half an hour. I understand there's some staff discussion going on. We want to let that come to fruition as well. So, we are in recess, subject to the call of the chair, but I expect 30 minutes.
John?
We're on a carefully balanced teeter-totter right here.
It's like a poem.
staff, and if we move with the aforementioned alacrity, we might be able to finish this thing before we have to go back into another series of votes. And in the interest of time, I am going to understand that Senator Burr has an amendment or some points, and I am going to yield to Senator Alexander to monitor that discussion on the Senate side.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to try to monitor Senator Burr. Senator Burr.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Chairman Klein, thank you. Thank you to my colleagues in the House and the Senate. I'm not going to offer an amendment, but I would like to take a couple of minutes to speak to my colleagues. This is a monumental bill. It does change elementary and secondary education in a huge way. And each one of us has a responsibility when we do that to fix things that are broken. I would suggest to all of my colleagues, not only at this table, but in this institution, that when the money does not follow the intended population, that's broken. Title I money was designed to target poor kids. And over the years of elementary and secondary education, it no longer follows poor kids where they live. And I thought we had an obligation, as we move something this massive, to fix that formula. We're not going to do it. Congressman Thompson had an approach. I had an approach. We were doing it for the right reason. I think we could have come to a bicameral agreement. We're not going to be given that opportunity, and I understand it. I'm not here to rain on anybody's parade, but I am here to pull on the emotion strings of every member of Congress to say, when a program isn't accomplishing the investment that we intend it to accomplish for the population we meant it for, then it's broken. And I know that incorporated in this legislation is a study. You study things that you don't know the answer to. We know the answer to this. There are poor kids around the country that don't receive Title I money because Title I money is captured in historical states and communities that no longer have the population. Now, in the Senate, we came up with a bipartisan approach that I thought actually worked. But it didn't work for probably 10 years because it didn't take effect until we increased the funding of elementary and secondary education to the tune of $5 billion additional dollars, from $13 to $18 billion. I wasn't going to be here when it implemented, but I could leave this institution knowing that we had in place something that brought equity for all kids around the country. We passed on that. I think that was a huge mistake, colleagues. I'm not sure when we're going to be given an opportunity to fix something that's broken, but I hope it won't be as long as it took us to get to the point that we reformed elementary and secondary education. I hope that the two chairs will focus on this, and I hope we will do it in a bipartisan, bicameral way. Let's not wait for a study. Let's all grow the backbone that it takes to make changes where some people win and some people lose. I went through this fight years ago as it related to HIV/AIDS. And we changed it. And I won't tell you it's 100% equitable today, but there are HIV/AIDS patients around this country that now receive treatment that didn't get it before because we had grown bureaucracies in places that no longer had HIV patients but received HIV funding. And I look at this as no different issue. It's time for us to fix the funding mechanism to make sure that regardless of where poor kids are, the money finds their way to make sure that we support their education. Where they aren't, then we've got to be big enough to say, no, you don't deserve the funding anymore. Mr. Chairman, I have ended my editorial. I look forward to the completion of this legislation, and I hope that in some way, shape, or form, my colleagues on both sides of the Capitol will join those of us that are committed to try to find a solution, regardless of what that looks like, where we can at least leave this institution and this earth believing that the investment that we thought was important gets to the kids that it was intended to get to. I yield the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Senator Burr. He has spoken today with the same sort of passion that he did in our Senate deliberations. He's one of the most valuable and respected members of our committee. I agree with him on his position, voted with him, and think he's right. As with some other very important issues that different ones of us feel strong about, it couldn't make its way all the way through this consensus process that we have. But that doesn't mean we have to stop. I have a proposal on scholarship for kids that I am not going to stop on. And Senator Burr obviously has a passion on this that he's not going to stop on. He did, by his advocacy, make a change in Title II funding, which we have adopted. And I congratulate him for that. And we'll continue to pay attention to what he has to say about the fairness of Title I funding. And I thank him for his comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Casey.
just a brief comment. Senator Burr and I have had a disagreement about this, and Richard understands that, and we understand each other. We've also worked on a number of issues together over the years. This is one where we couldn't get on the same page, but I respect what Richard's saying. And just like I worked with him on getting the ABLE Act done, one of the best things the United States Congress has done in a while, I'll continue to work with him. On this, we have a fundamental disagreement. Just some quick numbers. I know we have to move quickly. His amendment would be have a huge adverse impact on Pennsylvania and a lot of other states. Here's what the Council of Great City Schools tell us in their analysis, that pursuant to this amendment, if it were adopted, 70% of the nation's school districts would lose future funding relative to their current allocation of Title I funds. So that's about 9,000 school districts nationwide that would lose money. In the state of Pennsylvania, $120 million of a loss. Not a single district in our state would gain money under the formula. So I obviously have issues with it, but I won't belabor the point. I have great respect for Richard, and I know we'll keep talking. Thanks very much.
Are there other comments on the Senate side? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Senator Burr for his editorial, for his passion. And I would say to my colleagues here, we have adopted a practice in this institution of talking about my friend so-and-so from someplace or another. And I just want to underscore that Mr. Burr is not only my friend, he's one of my best friends. So I appreciate that passion. We'll move on. It is now in order to, I think, have an amendment from Mr. Grothman.
Thank you very much. I mentioned in my opening remarks yesterday, I thought the authorization levels in this bill were a little bit high. A couple comments on them. First of all, I think whoever decided on the authorization levels used what I am led to believe is probably a high estimate on the appropriated level for 2016. So you're jumping off of an artificially high point. Since the time that these maybe were negotiated, we are more and more likely to see an interest rate coming from the Fed, which means there should, if this was a well-functioning body, mean we should be spending less across the board to compensate on that. I don't know what's going to happen to our budget because of the incident in Paris over the weekend, but common sense would tell you it doesn't mean the United States government's going to be spending less. So given these things and the fact that we recently cleared the $18 trillion mark in debt and the fact that in the past we have had massive increases of federal aid to education without any apparent result in improving test scores, I decided to introduce an amendment using the jumping off point being the appropriated level for 2016 and then not having an increase for 4 years as we try to work our way towards a balanced budget. So I realize it's only the authorized level, it's not the appropriated level, but I don't really feel comfortable with this idea of voting for bills with big authorized amounts and then have the appropriators act as the adults in the room. So there is the amendment.
The gentleman yields back. Are there House conferees who would like to speak on Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our this would authorize funding levels under what we expect to be debating, what's been allowed in the budget for the upcoming years. We're going to debate the appropriations, and that can be at a later date. Injecting this and having an arbitrary limit on the on that appropriations is inappropriate. Our student population is growing. The needs are growing. The majority of the students enrolled in public schools now are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And so we need more funding under Title I and other provisions of this bill, not less. And I think it's inappropriate at this point to try to restrict the possible appropriation. This is just an authorization. The debate on appropriations will come later. But I think it's inappropriate to arbitrarily limit that debate with this amendment, and I would oppose the amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Rokita, you're recognized.
I thank the chairman. I would articulate support for this amendment. As vice chairman of the budget committee, we recently, towards the beginning of this year, sat around a similar table. Senator Enzi's smiling because he knows he was chair of that committee. Worked very hard to get the first bicameral budget resolution since 2001. And here now at the end of the year, we seem to be throwing that agreement to the wind, and we wonder why people mistrust us on our spending issues. Yes, I guess the appropriators, we can wait on them and they can finally decide the issue, but all of us ought to be concerned about spending levels. And that's why, in fact, in this bill and most other authorizing bills, we do put numbers. And what Mr. Grothman's amendment is saying is that a 6.282% growth in spending caps as articulated in this bill, I would respectfully mention to the ranking member, is not what's needed. Our bill, when we authorize it coming out of the Education and Workforce Committee, in fact, flatline spending. This goes in an opposite direction. And it's not needed. As I said yesterday, since the 1970s, when the federal government, we decided to get into the education business, spending on education has gone up at the federal level 300%. And as we also know, test scores have not nearly followed that. In fact, they've mostly been flatlined. So clearly throwing more money at a problem does not solve it, and I would urge support for Mr. Grothman's amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Are there other House conferees seeking to be heard on the gentleman from Wisconsin's amendment? If not, the question occurs on the gentleman's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Could I ask for a roll call?
Recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll of House conferees.
Mr. Klein.
Aye.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mrs. Fox.
Mr. Klein.
Mr. Klein votes aye. Mrs. Fox.
Aye.
Mrs. Fox votes aye. Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe votes aye. Mr. Thompson.
No.
Mr. Thompson votes no. Mr. Guthrie.
Aye.
Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Rokita.
Aye.
Mr. Rokita votes aye. Mr. Messer.
Aye.
Mr. Messer votes aye. Mr. Grothman.
Aye.
Mr. Grothman votes aye. Mr. Russell.
By proxy, aye.
Mr. Russell votes aye by proxy. Mr. Corbello.
By proxy, aye.
Mr. Corbello votes aye by proxy. Mr. Scott.
No.
Mr. Scott votes no. Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Davis votes no. Ms. Fudge. Ms. Fudge votes no. Mr. Polis.
No.
Mr. Polis votes no. Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson votes no. Ms. Bonamici. Ms. Bonamici votes no. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes no.
The clerk will report the total.
The ayes are 9 and the noes are 8.
The amendment is agreed to, and the amendment is passed to the Senate for its consideration. I yield to Senator Alexander.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I oppose the amendment. The agreement does exactly what it ought to do. It pays attention to what the Congress and the President agreed upon in terms of our budget. This is a 4-year agreement. This agreement, recommended by the staff upon which we're voting, authorizes funding for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act at the levels approved by Congress in the Budget Control Act. For the first 2 years of the Budget Control Act, it uses the agreement we just adopted in Congress. And for the third and fourth year, it uses the original Budget Control Act. Now, that might be affected by sequester up or down. We don't know. We can't predict. But the logical way to create an authorization level, which is only an estimate, it's not our job to appropriate money. That belongs with the Appropriations Committee. An estimate of spending would be to authorize at the level of the Budget Control Act. So I'm repeating myself here because I don't want anybody to be able to say that we're authorizing above the Budget Control Act or below the Budget Control Act. We're authorizing at the level of the Budget Control Act. For the first 2 years, it is amendment levels we just adopted and which the President and Congress agreed on. And for the third and fourth year, it's the agreement that Senator Murray and Speaker Ryan recommended and we agreed on a few years ago. As for the Appropriations Committee making the decision, as far as I'm concerned, the adults in the room are the appropriators. If the Appropriations Committee were in charge of the whole federal budget, it'd be balanced. Because over the last 8 years, appropriation discretionary money has been about flat. Over the next several years, it will barely grow at the rate of inflation. And so if you want to balance the budget, either the rest of you get to work who are not appropriators, or give it to us and we'll do it because we've done it. So we appropriate about $1 trillion every year. It's the other $2.5 trillion that's breaking the bank, and we don't have the courage to deal with it. Every time it comes up in the Republican caucus or the Democratic caucus, people run and hide under the table. Until we start dealing with runaway entitlement spending, we're not going to have money for cancer research, for locks and dams, for military defense, for national laboratories, and for the other things that make this country great. So we've done the responsible thing. We've authorized to the exact levels of the Budget Control Act for 4 years. After that, it will be up to the appropriations committees, which have done a better job than the authorizing committees, specifically the Finance and Ways and Means committees, in terms of controlling the federal deficit. That's where the debt problem is, not with the appropriations bill. So those are the 2 points I would like to make about it. I oppose the amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murray.
Mr. Chairman, I concur with the strong statement by Chairman Alexander. I oppose this amendment strongly because it would threaten the bipartisan agreement that we have all worked so hard to achieve. And as I said before, this framework isn't what I would have written on my own or what Senator Alexander would have written on, or any member, but it is a compromise. And that's where we are at this point. And we were able to reach that agreement by sticking to the bipartisan budget deal and the strict spending caps within it that we just agreed on a month ago. Adopting this amendment would be a major step backward from that bipartisan agreement, as well as the bipartisan agreement that's reached on the authorization levels in this conference. And by the way, it will have serious consequences for children and communities. By funding levels that consistent with the bipartisan budget agreement, we were able to increase funding for key programs like Title I, which serves high-need schools in our states, and Impact Aid, which serves our military-connected children. Mr. Chairman, we have made it far too far in this bipartisan legislative process to fail on our responsibilities to adequately fund the law. We've come too far to fail our students who are struggling with poverty and our military-connected students. So I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this House amendment.
Any other comments? I do not have a request for a roll call vote on the Senate side, and so unless there is one, Will all of those in favor of the Grothman Amendment, please say aye.
I'd like a roll call.
Okay, there is a request for a roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Enzi.
Aye.
Senator Burr.
Aye.
Senator Isaacson. Senator Paul.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Collins.
No by proxy.
Senator Murkowski.
No.
Senator Kirk.
No by proxy.
Senator Scott.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Hatch.
No by proxy.
Senator Roberts.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Cassidy.
Yes.
Senator Murray.
No.
Senator Mikulski.
No by proxy.
Senator Sanders.
No by proxy.
Senator Casey.
No.
Senator Franken.
No by proxy.
Senator Bennett.
No.
Senator Whitehouse.
No.
Senator Baldwin.
No.
Senator Murphy.
No by proxy.
Senator Warren. Chairman Alexander.
No.
I have 6 ayes, 16 nays.
Mr. Chairman, the nays have it. The measure is not approved. The amendment is not agreed to.
The Senate does not accept the House offer. The amendment fails. Catch up with my script here. I am unaware of any other amendments. Are there conferees, House or Senate, who have an amendment which we're not aware? If no member is seeking recognition for amendment, the question occurs on the adoption of the recommendations as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The recommendations are adopted by the House and the Senate conferees. Is there a request for a roll call vote? I'll request a roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Klein.
Aye.
Mr. Klein votes aye. Mrs. Fox.
Aye.
Mrs. Fox votes aye. Mr. Rowe. Mr. Rowe votes aye. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Rokita. Mr. Rokita votes aye. Mr. Messer.
Aye.
Mr. Messer votes aye. Mr. Grothman.
Aye.
Mr. Grothman votes aye. Mr. Russell.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Russell votes aye by proxy. Mr. Corbello. Mr. Corbello votes aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott votes aye. Mrs. Davis. Mrs. Davis votes aye. Ms. Fudge. Ms. Fudge votes aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis votes aye. Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson votes aye. Ms. Bonamici. Ms. Bonamici votes aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes aye. Senator Enzi. Senator Enzi votes aye. Senator Burr. Senator Burr votes aye. Senator Isaacson. Senator Isaacson votes aye. Senator Paul. Senator Paul votes no by proxy. Senator Collins.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins votes aye by proxy. Senator Murkowski. Senator Murkowski votes aye. Senator Kirk.
Yes by proxy.
Senator Kirk votes aye by proxy. Senator Scott.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Scott votes aye by proxy. Senator Hatch.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Hatch votes aye by proxy. Senator Roberts.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Roberts votes aye by proxy. Senator Cassidy. Senator Cassidy votes aye. Senator Murray.
Aye.
Senator Murray votes aye. Senator Mikulski.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Mikulski votes aye by proxy. Senator Sanders.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Sanders votes aye by proxy. Senator Casey. Senator Casey votes aye. Senator Franken.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Franklin votes aye. By proxy, Senator Bennett. Aye. Senator Bennett votes aye. Senator Whitehouse. Aye. Senator Whitehouse votes aye. Senator Baldwin. Aye. Senator Baldwin votes aye. Senator Murphy.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Murphy votes aye by proxy. Senator Warren. Aye. Senator Warren votes aye. Chairman Alexander.
Aye.
Chairman Alexander votes aye.
Very good. Clerk will report the total.
The ayes are 39, the nays are 1.
All conferees voted in the aye except one. Thank you very, very much. Before we adjourn, I've got a couple of quick administrative announcements. I ask unanimous consent to authorize staff to make technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. I know some members would like to make some closing comments, and I would like to yield to Senator Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. I would. Could you say anything about the process following this, about when we sign the conference report, that kind of thing?
I think signature sheets are actually available now for members wishing to sign. The full legislative text will be available Monday, the 30th, full legislative text. Just a procedural note on how that works. If you sign the conference sheets, the conference report today, and you look at the legislative text and you change your mind, you can change your vote. There is a window there that allows for that to happen. Our expectation is that we will bring the conference report, the bill, to the floor of the House for votes. I'm not the floor leader, but I understand on the 2nd, or as late as the 3rd, but probably the 2nd of December.
Well, Mr. Klein, my remarks would be this. I know you're retiring from the Congress after this Congress, but this is a great way to begin to conclude. We've got another year to go to conclude your work. The real winners today are 100,000 public schools, which are attended by 50 million children, where 3.5 million teachers work, and who are eager for us to bring some sort of certainty to federal education policy. This is a law that everybody knows needed to be fixed, but it's also a law that fixing it, let's put it this way, fixing this law, in fixing this law, we know that there were alligators lurking in every corner of the pond. And the fact that we were able, both in the Senate and the House, to navigate that pond and to deal respectfully with one another and to recognize that in some cases our different points of view couldn't be included, I think is a great credit to the process. Governors, teachers, superintendents, Republicans, Democrats wanted us to do this, and we've done it so far. There's not only a consensus about the need to fix it, we have now shown today with this vote that in the Senate and the House of the United States, there's a consensus about how to fix it, and that means we'll keep the important measures of student achievement, but we will restore to states, communities, and classroom teachers the responsibility for figuring out what to do about the results of tests. This would not have happened without your leadership and that of Bobby Scott, who has been a terrific partner in all of this, and without the cooperation of the members of the House and the Senate on this committee. I've complimented Senator Murray probably excessively over the last year, but she's been absolutely key to this. So I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this. I came to the Senate to not just to make a speech, but to try to get a result, and today we've gotten one.
Thank the Senator. Senator Murray.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the hard work that you, Representative Scott, Chairman Alexander, and I have put into this, and to especially thank all of our staffs who have worked extremely hard to get us to this point as well. But I also want to thank every member of this conference. I think this is a proud day for Congress to show that we can have agreements and disagreements, but at the end of the day, we can do the right thing for the people that we represent, find a way to compromise. This isn't the bill I would have written or anyone here at the table. As the chairman knows, I've had to give on some things I didn't want to, but so has every member here. And that is how we make our country a better place and show the young people in this country who are coming up behind us democracy can work. and I really want to compliment everyone who is involved in this process. It is a good day, as Chairman Alexander said, for our schools, but for our students, our parents, our teachers, and the country, and I really commend everyone who's worked on this. Look forward to getting it through the House and Senate and showing the public that we can actually fix a broken law when everybody agrees that it is broken. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when we began, I quoted the Supreme Court case in Brown that suggested that no child can reasonably be expected to succeed in life if denied the opportunity of an education, and such an opportunity is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. This bill moves that ball forward. We had a lot of disagreements to begin with, but with the work of Senator Alexander, Senator Murray, and our cooperative work, and, Mr. Chairman, the almost mystical work of the staffs, working long hours, resolving very difficult disagreements, moving the ball forward in everybody's mind. I want to thank our staffs for the work that they've been doing. And certainly Senator Alexander, Senator Murray, you, Mr. Chairman, working together to get this job done. Mr. Chairman, a lot has been said about your retirement, but I would want to point out that our little committee still has School Nutrition, Older Americans Act, Head Start, Higher Education Act, Juvenile Justice, Perkins Career and Technical Education. Mr. Chairman, if we could work together on those as we have on this, we'll do a lot for the American people. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for reminding me how it's a little premature for me to start relaxing. Are there other members who wish to speak before I close the closing? Senator
Chairman,
Whitehouse.
If I could just mention one thing. It did not make it through the conference process, but I have tried to create a vehicle where a local school that wants to innovate can seek to obtain the relief necessary to innovate, not only from the local school board, but then from the state education bureaucracy, which could be far away, and also from the federal level. Because it's very hard, if you're a school that wants to innovate, to start down that process not knowing how you're going to be able to get through all three. And having a big fight and winning at the local level, and even having another big fight and winning at the state level, but if you can't then get the federal support. So I think a lot dies off right nipped in the bud because there is no path for that. The Innovation Schools Amendment that I had hoped would get through this conference would have been a means for facilitating that. And if any colleagues are interested in continuing to pursue that effort, I am here available, eager to have it go forward, and think it will add to the innovation and the excitement that is possible in our classrooms. And I thank the chairman for recognizing me, and I want to thank both my chairman and my ranking member, and Chairman Klein and Ranking Member Scott, for what has been, on balance, a really terrific process and a really terrific result. Thank you for recognizing me, Chairman.
I thank the senator for his participation. I applaud his ingenuity in signing up co-sponsors here. Are there other? Mr. Polis.
I want to thank the chair and the ranking member of both bodies. I also want to thank the staff who worked so tirelessly on both sides. I'd particularly like to highlight the support for charter schools in the bill, moved from Title V to Title IV, reflecting the priorities of the All-Star Act and of the House-passed charter school bill, reserving some of the funds for high-quality charter schools as a national initiative, and deploying the bulk of the funds through the states to expand and replicate models that we know work for kids. It's been a pleasure to work with the committee on staff and including those priorities in the bill. And I know that many children in underserved areas will benefit from increased school choice, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. He yields back. Are there other senators or House conferees seeking recognition? If not, let me take just a minute to say thank you to all of the conferees, House and Senate. It really has been a pleasure. The cooperation has been remarkable. But I want to stress here my thanks to the staffs, to Senator Alexander's staff and Senator Murray's staff and Mr. Scott's staff and my staff and all the member staffs have been working incredible hours. And so I'm going to beg your indulgence for just a minute. I want to name some of the members of my staff who I know went many hours without sleep. Janelle Beelan, Chris Ann Pierce, Lauren Aronson, Shirai Yousefi, James Forrester, Kathleen L., Leslie Tatum, Mandy Schomburg, but especially to my staff director, Julianne Sullivan. I know many of you did not know who she was, perhaps, but now you all know who she is. Also, of course, lead education policy director Amy Jones and Brad Thomas, who has put in incredible hours. This could not have been done without them, so I want to thank you. If I had the list of all your staff's names, I'd read them too.
Well,
And
Mr.
if you
Chairman,
do, please do.
If you indulge me for a minute, because
Happy to.
you're absolutely right. I mean, the staffs work to get a result. I mean, I think they took their lead from us, which they're supposed to do, but they work to get a result. And I want to especially thank Senator Murray's education staff, Evan Schatz, Sarah Bolton, Amanda Beaumont, Jake Cornett, Leanne Hodick, Ali Kimmel, Aisa Conchola, Chairman Klein's staff you mentioned, but we thank every single one of those. Congressman Scott's staff, thank you very much. Were your staff, Denise Fort and Jacques Chevalier, Helen Pachik, and there
Well, I
more?
was going to read the list, but you.
Why don't you do
you
that?
go right ahead. I don't have the list in front of me.
Well,
Keep reading.
and
Keep reading.
John, you thanked all, well, that's all I have.
Okay.
John, you thanked those on your staff, didn't you?
I did.
And then I want to especially thank those who worked on our staff: David Cleary, Peter Oppenheim, Lindsay Fryer, Bill Knudsen, Jordan Hayes, Hillary Knudsen, Jake Baker. They did a terrific job.
Thank you. And Mr. Scott, I know you have some staff names there.
Thank you. He
Recognized.
mentioned, I think, Denise Fort and Jackie Chevalier, Brian Kennedy, Christian Haynes, Helen Pajek, Raina Reed, Alex Payne, and Kevin McDermott all worked. And all of them, Mr. Chairman, as has been pointed out, worked long hours, late into the night, and occasionally all night. And as I indicated, they came up with almost mystical solutions to very complex problems, and their work, our work could not have been done without their work. So thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. I thank all conferees, House and Senate. All those staff that we just mentioned will continue to work. There's still some smoothing that needs to be done through Thanksgiving. The formal final conference report should be ready for review by conferees on Monday, November 30th. That keeps us on the legal House timeline so that we can take up the vote on the floor, as I mentioned. And then, as I mentioned, I think there are some sheets so that members can, if they're going to have difficulty not being available that day, can sign now.
Mr. Klein, for the senators' information, everyone's information, I've told senators that once the House acts on it, that we'll have it, well, not once the House acts on it, but it'll be public for at least a week. Senators will have at least a week to consider a public version of the conference report before we vote on it. House may vote on it in the interim, but we'll have at least a week to read it, so there won't be any surprises.
Thank that. The business of this conference committee is concluded, and we're adjourned.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, we need to run over here quickly and get a picture with the other two.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We should have been doing this.